Captain Jiho Kim walked slowly into the massive Galactic Council chamber, his black military boots clicking against the shiny metal floor. The huge room was filled with hundreds of alien beings from across the galaxy, all sitting in floating chairs that glowed with soft blue light. Their eyes followed him as he moved toward the center platform, and he could hear them whispering to each other in languages that sounded like music, static, and ocean waves. The holographic display above his head flickered to life, showing the image of his ship, the Defiant. Compared to the sleek, curved vessels of the other species floating nearby, it looked like someone had built it in their garage. The hull was made of thick, dark metal plates welded together. Large gun barrels stuck out from the sides like old cannons. The engines at the back looked bulky and simple, nothing like the glowing energy rings that powered the alien ships. Admiral Vextara of the Crystalline Hegemony was the first to speak. Her body was made of living crystal that changed colors when she talked, shifting from blue to purple as her voice filled the chamber. "Captain Kim, surely this cannot be humanity's actual contribution to our joint defense fleet." Her tone was polite, but everyone could hear the barely hidden laughter underneath. The floating squid-like creatures from the Tethys Collective made wet, gurgling sounds that their translators turned into words. The propulsion system appears to burn actual chemicals for thrust. How primitive. Their tentacles wiggled with what looked like amusement. A delegate from the energy dancers, beings made of pure light who lived inside special containment suits, pulsed bright yellow as they spoke. "Our scans show kinetic projectile weapons, metal bullets fired by explosive powder. We have not seen such technology in our museums for over 3,000 years. Jiho stood perfectly still in the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. His uniform was simple and dark, without the glowing badges and floating symbols that decorated the clothing of other species. His black hair was cut short and neat, and his dark eyes showed no emotion as the aliens continued their commentary. "The shield generators appear to be based on magnetic field manipulation," said a tall, thin being whose skin looked like tree bark. "Very basic, very inefficient." "The computer systems still use quantum processing cores," added another voice from somewhere in the crowd. "How do they even maintain those ancient things?" Mina Park, the human diplomatic aide, sat in the observers section and watched the scene unfold. Her fingers gripped the edge of her seat as the aliens continued to mock humanity's offering. She wanted to stand up and tell them they were wrong, that they didn't understand what they were looking at, but she stayed quiet. Captain Kim had told her this would happen. The worst comments came from Admiral Thane of the Solar Empire, whose people had been the self-appointed leaders of galactic military affairs for the past 500 years. His golden skin gleamed under the chamber lights as he stood up from his floating throne. "Honored council members, I fear we have made an error in judgment. Humanity is clearly not ready to contribute to serious military operations. Perhaps they should focus on safer duties." The chamber filled with what sounded like alien laughter, clicks, hisses, musical notes, and electronic beeps that their universal translators couldn't quite capture. Some species didn't laugh at all, but their body language showed their amusement. "Clearly enough, I propose," Admiral Thane continued, "that we assign this BUMOS vessel to outer rim patrol duties, far from any important systems or trade routes, somewhere it cannot accidentally interfere with real military operations." The vote was quick and unanimous. Every species except humanity voted to send the Defiant to the Kepler Void, an empty region of space on the very edge of the galaxy where nothing ever happened. It was the kind of assignment given to ships that were too old, too slow, or too unreliable for real work. Throughout the entire humiliating process, Captain Kim never changed his expression. When the vote was announced, he simply nodded once and said, "The Defiant accepts this assignment. We will depart within the hour." As the session ended and the various aliens began filing out of the chamber, many of them were still making jokes about the human ship. But a few of the older, more experienced species watched Captain Kim more carefully. There was something about his calm acceptance that didn't quite fit with someone who had just been publicly embarrassed. Admiral Vexitara approached him as he prepared to leave. "Captain, I hope you understand this decision is not personal. Your species simply needs more time to develop proper military technology. Jiho looked at her with those steady dark eyes and smiled, not the angry smile of someone trying to hide their hurt feelings, but the quiet smile of someone who knew a secret. Admiral, I understand completely. Some lessons can only be learned through experience. As he walked away, his fingers briefly touched a small metal pin on his uniform collar. The symbol was so old and worn that it was barely visible, but those who knew what to look for might have recognized it as something that predated the current galactic civilization by thousands of years. Back on the Defiant, First Officer Taiho, Lee was waiting for his captain's return. Sir, how did it go? Exactly as expected, Lieutenant, Jiho replied as he looked out at the stars. Plot a course for the Kepler void. And Lieutenant? Yes, sir. Begin the awakening sequence. It's almost time. 3 months had passed since the Defiant was banished to the Kepler void, and the crew had settled into what looked like routine patrol duty. The vast emptiness of space stretched in every direction, with only distant stars providing any light in the endless darkness. Most ships would have found this assignment boring and meaningless, but there was something different about how the humans went about their work. Chief Engineer Hyeri Choi crawled through the maintenance tunnels deep inside the ship, her flashlight illuminating sections that weren't supposed to exist according to the blueprints they had shared with the Galactic Council. Her hands moved with practiced skill as she checked connections and adjusted settings on equipment that hummed with a strange, almost musical frequency. The other crew members called these areas the deep sections, and none of them ever talked about what they found there. Captain, we're getting some unusual readings from the long-range sensors, called out Communications Officer Seojin Kang from his station on the bridge. His fingers danced across controls that looked simple on the surface but responded to touch patterns that would have confused alien observers. The screens in front of him showed star maps that went far beyond what the ship's official sensor range should have been capable of detecting. Captain Jiho walked over to look at the displays, his expression growing more serious as he studied the data. Show me the Deep Space Monitoring Network, he said quietly. Seojin's hands moved in a complex sequence across his controls, and suddenly the main screen lit up with information that was coming from sources scattered across the galaxy. Hidden relay stations, automated monitoring posts, and sensor networks that officially didn't exist were all feeding data back to the Defiant. It was clear that humanity had been busy in the years since joining the galactic community, but not in ways that anyone suspected. There, said Seojin, pointing to a section of the display that showed the very edge of known space. Energy signatures moving inward, massive ones, and they're not matching any known technology in our databases. The readings were disturbing. Entire star systems were simply disappearing, not destroyed in the usual sense, but completely vanishing. From all senses, as if they had never existed at all. The pattern was slow but steady, working its way inward toward the populated regions of the galaxy. Navigator Yuna Jung looked up from her station, where she was plotting courses using star charts that were far older than anything in the official galactic archives. Captain, if these readings are correct, we're looking at something that moves faster than anything we've seen before, and it's heading directly toward the core systems. The bridge fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Everyone knew what this meant, even if they couldn't say it out loud yet. The stories passed down through human military families, the legends that were never written down but never forgotten, all pointed to the same terrifying possibility. Down, in the ship's medical bay, Chief Medical Officer Sunho Im was reviewing files that weren't part of any official medical database. The information had been gathered over generations of human exploration, collected from ancient ruins and abandoned worlds that the other species had never bothered to examine closely. The data painted a picture of something that had happened before, something that the galaxy had faced and survived, but barely. The pattern matches, he said to himself, as he compared the current sensor readings with historical data. Energy drain, reality distortion, complete system consumption. It's exactly what the old records described. Meanwhile, in the ship's science lab, Officer Jiwon Seo was running calculations that made no sense according to conventional physics. The equations she was working with came from research that humanity had been conducting in secret for decades, based on technology they had discovered but never revealed to the galactic community. Her results showed that whatever was approaching from the edge of space wasn't just dangerous, it was something that could end galactic civilization entirely. The first distress calls started coming in a week later, frontier colonies reporting strange phenomena before their communications cut out completely, trading ships that simply vanished without a trace, deep space stations that stopped responding to all contact attempts. Seojin intercepted the official communications between the various alien governments, and what he heard wasn't encouraging. The Galactic Council was treating the disappearances as isolated incidents, possibly the work of pirates or rogue AI systems. They had no idea what they were actually facing. "Sir," he said to Captain Jiho, "the Council is sending investigation teams to the affected areas. Small ships, minimal weapons, standard exploration protocols." Jiho closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "They're sending sheep to investigate wolves," he said quietly. "How long before the investigation teams start disappearing too?" The answer came 3 days later. Every ship the Council had sent to investigate the strange disappearances had vanished without sending so much as a single distress signal. The alien governments were finally starting to panic, but they still didn't understand what they were dealing with. In her quarters, Engineer Hieri was making final preparations to systems that had been sleeping for 1,000 years. Ancient technology that humanity had found, studied, and learned to operate but had kept hidden until the right moment. Her hands moved over controls that looked like crystalline growths, responding to her touch with patterns of light that seemed almost alive. "The deep systems are responding well," she reported to Captain Jiho during their private briefing. "All connections are stable, and the power flow is within acceptable parameters. We can begin full activation whenever you give the order." Jiho nodded as he looked out at the stars through the window of his ready room. Somewhere out there in the darkness, an ancient enemy was awakening and moving toward the heart of galactic civilization. The other species had no idea what was coming, and their advanced technology would be useless against what they were about to face. But humanity had been preparing for this day for longer than anyone knew. The time for hiding was almost over. The Boer combined galactic fleet assembled in the Altara system looked like something from a dream. Thousands of ships from dozens of different species formed perfect battle formations that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. The crystalline hegemony's vessels sparkled like jewels, their transparent hulls filled with swirling energy. The Solar Empire's golden battleships moved in precise geometric patterns, their weapon arrays glowing with stored power. Even the mysterious energy dancers had sent their containment ships, crackling with barely controlled lightning. Admiral Thane stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Golden Triumph, watching the tactical displays with supreme confidence. His officers moved efficiently around him, their golden skin gleaming under the bridge lights as they coordinated with the other fleets. "Sensors show the enemy approaching our position," reported his tactical officer. "Estimated arrival in 30 minutes." The alien commanders were calm and professional. They had overwhelming numerical superiority, the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, and shield technology that could deflect entire stars. What could possibly go wrong? The Devourers appeared on the edge of sensor range like a nightmare made real. They weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were massive, dark structures that seemed to bend space around themselves. Each one was the size of a small moon, covered in surfaces that shifted and flowed like liquid metal. They moved through space without any visible propulsion, reality warping around them as they advanced. "All ships, engage at maximum range," Admiral Thane commanded. "Full power to all weapon systems." The galaxy's finest war machines opened fire simultaneously. Beams of pure energy that could cut through planets lanced across space toward the approaching enemy. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroids discharged their fury. Gravity weapons that could crush stars activated their deadly fields. For a moment, it looked like the attack was working. The energy beams struck the Devourer vessels and seemed to cause damage, creating bright explosions that lit up the darkness of space. The alien commanders allowed themselves small smiles of satisfaction, Then the explosions faded, and the Devourer ships were completely undamaged. "Impossible," whispered Admiral Vex Tara from her crystal bridge. Her instruments showed that their weapons had definitely hit their targets, but somehow the energy had been absorbed or redirected. "Increase power to maximum. All ships concentrate fire on the lead vessel." The second wave of attacks was even more intense than the first. Every ship in the fleet poured their full firepower into a single target, enough destructive force to shatter entire solar systems. The space around the lead Devourer lit up like a small sun as thousands of weapons struck it simultaneously. When the light faded, the enemy ship was not only undamaged, it had grown larger. "They're feeding on our attacks," said Tactical Officer Do-Yun Shin aboard the distant Defiant, watching the battle through their sensors. His voice was grim as he studied the readings. "Every shot we fire at them makes them stronger." "Captain?" Jiho nodded silently, his hands gripping the rail of his command platform. He had hoped the other species would find a way to win, but deep down he had known this moment would come. The Devourers began their counterattack, and it was unlike anything the Galactic Fleet had ever faced. Reality itself seemed to twist around. Their weapons. Ships that were struck didn't just explode, they ceased to exist as if they had never been built at all. Entire squadrons vanished from sensors and memory simultaneously, leaving only empty space, where moments before there had been hundreds of vessels. Admiral Thane watched in horror as half his fleet simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not damaged, gone as if they had never existed. His tactical displays couldn't even register what had happened to them. "All ships, retreat to secondary positions," he ordered, his voice cracking with panic. But retreat was impossible. The Devourers moved through space faster than any ship could flee, their reality-warping attacks reaching across impossible distances. The Energy Dancer's containment ships imploded as their lightning was turned against them. The Crystalline. Hegemony's beautiful vessels shattered like glass as harmonic frequencies tore them apart from within. Admiral Vex Tara's flagship was one of the first major casualties. Her final transmission cut across all frequencies as her crystal bridge began to crack. "Any ship capable of resistance, please help us." The transmission ended in static as her vessel folded in on itself and vanished. The survivors of the Galactic Fleet fled in complete chaos, their formation destroyed and their confidence shattered. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before limped away from the battle with systems failing and hulls cracked. The greatest military force the galaxy had ever assembled was running for their lives from an enemy they couldn't even hurt. That's when Captain Jiho's voice cut through the panicked. "Communications like a calm wind in a storm. This is Captain Kim of the human vessel, Defiant. We are moving to intercept the enemy formation." The fleeing alien ships received this transmission with confusion and disbelief. The humans were going to attack, the same primitive vessel that had been exiled to the Outer Rim as a joke. Communications Officer Seojin had to repeat the message twice before anyone believed it was real. "Captain Kim, this is Admiral Thane," came the desperate reply from the Golden Triumph. "You must retreat immediately. These weapons are beyond anything we've ever faced. Your ship cannot possibly survive." But the Defiant was already accelerating toward the Devourer fleet, its crude-looking engines somehow pushing it faster than the most advanced alien vessels could travel. The surviving ships watched in amazement as the human vessel overtook their retreat, moving toward certain destruction with impossible speed. Deep inside the Defiant, systems that had been hidden for centuries were finally awakening. Engineer Hieri's hands flew over controls that pulsed with ancient light as power flowed through conduits that weren't supposed to exist. The ship's hull began to change, plates shifting and retracting to reveal technology that predated the current. Galactic civilization. Science Officer Jiwon monitored readings that defied everything she had learned about physics. The ship's true nature was revealing itself at last, and what emerged was something that made even the Devourer vessels look primitive by comparison. "All stations report ready," she called out to Captain Jiho. "The deep systems are fully online." Captain Jiho took a deep breath and looked out at the approaching enemy fleet. Behind him, the broken remnants of the Galactic Fleet watched in stunned silence as humanity's primitive ship prepared to face an enemy that had just destroyed the most powerful military force in known history. "Then it's time," he said quietly. "Let's show them what we really are." Captain Jiho walked through the corridors of his ship with steady steps, but everything around him was changing. The walls that had looked like simple metal plating for months were now shifting and flowing, revealing surfaces that seemed to be made of living crystal mixed with unknown metals. Lights that had never existed before began to glow along the ceiling, casting strange shadows that danced like they were alive. The crew members he passed were working at stations that hadn't been there an hour ago. Panels had emerged from what everyone thought were solid walls, displaying information in languages that predated human civilization. But somehow, his people knew exactly what they were doing, as if they had been trained for this their entire lives. "Captain," called out Engineer Hieri from a control station that looked like it had grown from the floor itself. Her hands moved over surfaces that responded to her touch with ripples of light. "The deep core is responding perfectly. Power levels are climbing steadily, and all the ancient connections are holding." Jiho nodded and continued toward the most restricted section of the ship, a place that no alien inspector had ever been allowed to see, hidden behind blast doors that were marked with warnings in 12 different languages. As he approached, the doors recognized his presence and slid open silently, revealing a chamber that shouldn't have been possible to fit inside the ship's known dimensions. The room beyond was vast and circular, with walls that curved away into darkness. In the center stood something that looked like a mixture of a command chair and an alien altar, covered in symbols that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. Cables and conduits made of materials that didn't appear in any textbook connected the chair to systems that stretched throughout the entire ship. Senior aide Minji Han was already there, monitoring displays that showed the ship's transformation in real time. "Sir, the neural interface is fully calibrated. All safety protocols are active, and the AI core is responding to initial contact attempts." Jiho sat down in the ancient chair and immediately felt something change in his mind. It was like hearing a voice that had been whispering so quietly, for so long that he had learned to ignore it, but now it was speaking clearly. The ship, no, not just the ship, but something much older and more complex, was waking up after centuries of sleep. "Hello, Captain," said a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere at once. It sounded like Jiho's own voice, but layered with harmonics that suggested vast intelligence and impossible age. "I have been waiting for this moment." The neural connection deepened, and suddenly Jiho could feel every part of the ship as if it were his own body. He could sense the quantum reactors humming to life in the engineering section, feel the weapon systems emerging from their hidden compartments, and experience the sensor arrays extending their reach across impossible distances. Down in the medical, Chief Medical Officer Sunho Im watched his captain's vital signs with growing amazement. The readings showed brain activity that was far beyond normal human levels, but somehow remained stable and controlled. "His neural patterns are synchronizing with something much larger," he reported to the bridge crew. "It's like watching two minds become one." The ship's exterior was transforming as well. Hull plates that had looked crude and welded together were sliding apart to reveal surfaces that gleamed with their own inner light. Weapons emerged that had no names in any current language, devices that manipulated space and time itself rather than simply throwing energy or matter at their targets. Navigation Officer Yuna Jung stared at her displays in wonder as new star charts appeared, showing not just the current galaxy, but the paths between galaxies, trade routes that had been used millions of years ago by civilizations that had vanished before humans had even learned to make fire. "Captain, I'm seeing navigation data that covers the entire known universe and places beyond it." The consciousness that was awakening inside the ship was ancient beyond measure. It had been built by the precursors, the mysterious race that had vanished from the galaxy long before any of the current species had developed space travel. They had left behind only ruins and legends, but this ship was something more. It was a guardian designed to awaken when the galaxy faced its greatest threat. "The Devourers," the ship's AI explained to Jiho through their neural link, "they have returned, just as we predicted they would. They consume entire realities, leaving nothing behind but empty space. We stopped them once before, but at great cost. Tactical Officer Do-hyun watched in fascination as weapon systems came online that operated on principles he had never imagined. Captain, these aren't just weapons, they're reality manipulators. They can change the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas. The transformation was accelerating now. Throughout the ship, crew members were discovering abilities they hadn't known they possessed. The human genetic code, it turned out, contained dormant sequences that had been placed there long ago by the precursors themselves. Humanity wasn't just another species that had developed space travel. They were the chosen inheritors of the galaxy's most advanced civilization. Science Officer Ji-won found herself understanding technologies that should have taken lifetimes to learn. Her hands moved over controls with perfect confidence as she activated systems that could manipulate time, space, and consciousness itself. "The quantum consciousness arrays are online," she reported. "We can interface directly with enemy systems." Now, the Defiant was no longer the crude-looking vessel that had been mocked by the Galactic Council. It was revealing itself as something that made even the most advanced alien technologies look primitive. Weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics, shields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and engines that moved through space by convincing the universe that the ship was already where it wanted to be. But the most remarkable change was in Captain Ji-ho himself. Through the neural interface, he had become something more than human while remaining essentially himself. He could feel the vast intelligence of the precursor AI, but his human creativity and adaptability gave it something it had never possessed before, the ability to grow and change in real time. "We are ready," he said, and his voice carried through every speaker on the ship with absolute authority. "The Devourers think they are facing the same galaxy they conquered before. They have no idea what we have become." Through the ship's enhanced sensors, he could see the enemy fleet approaching, confident in their invincibility. They had just destroyed the most powerful military force the current galaxy could assemble, and now they faced what appeared to be a single, outdated human vessel. They were about to learn that appearances could be very deceiving indeed. "All systems, full activation," Ji-ho commanded. "It's time to remind the universe that the precursors never truly left. We just learned to hide among the humans until the moment was right." The Defiant moved forward to meet its ancient enemy, no longer pretending to be anything other than what it truly was, the guardian of galactic civilization, finally awakened and ready for war. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment everything changed in galactic history. The Defiant approached the Devourer fleet alone, but it was no longer the same ship that had been dismissed by the Galactic Council months earlier. Every hull plate gleamed within a light, and weapons emerged from hidden compartments that shouldn't have existed in a vessel of its size. The first Devourer ship to attack the human vessel fired the same reality-warping beam that had erased entire squadrons from existence just minutes before. The attack struck the Defiant directly, and for a moment the surviving alien fleet held their breath, waiting to see another ship simply vanish from reality. Instead, something impossible happened. The Defiant absorbed the attack completely, and the energy that should have destroyed it was somehow redirected back at the Devourer vessel. But this wasn't just a reflection. The returned energy had been modified, turned into something that the ancient machine couldn't defend against. "Direct hit on enemy vessel 1, reported Tactical Officer Do-hyun, his voice filled with amazement as he watched his instruments. "Their adaptive shielding is failing. Whatever we just did, they've never seen anything like it before." Captain Ji-ho, still connected to the ship's ancient AI through the neural interface, could feel the Devourer's confusion rippling through space. For the first time in millions of years, these ancient machines were facing something they couldn't immediately understand or counter. The consciousness transfer arrays that Science Officer Ji-won had activated were the key to humanity's strategy. Instead of just trying to destroy the Devourer ships with brute force, the Defiant was uploading human tactical intelligence directly into their systems. The machines that had terrorized the galaxy for eons suddenly found their own technology, being turned against them by minds that could adapt faster than they could evolve. "Enemy Vessel 2 is losing cohesion," called out Engineer Hyeri from her station. "Their reality manipulation fields are becoming unstable." I think we're overwhelming their processing capacity. The Devourers had always won their battles the same way, by absorbing enemy attacks and adapting to them, then using that knowledge to create even more devastating weapons. But human creativity worked differently. Every time the machines tried to analyze and counter the Defiant's attacks, the ship's tactics would shift to something completely unexpected. Officer Hyan Ko and engineer Min Jae Lim worked together at the consciousness transfer controls, their hands moving in perfect synchronization as they commandeered Devourer systems one by one. "We're getting control of their navigation systems," Hyun reported. "They're losing the ability to coordinate their attacks." What made the human approach so effective wasn't just superior technology. It was the way human minds worked, where the Devourers followed logical patterns that could eventually be predicted. Humans could make intuitive leaps that seemed to come from nowhere. Captain Jiho would make decisions that appeared random but turned out to be exactly what was needed. The tide of battle shifted dramatically as more Devourer ships fell under human control. Instead of facing a unified enemy fleet, the Defiant was now fighting alongside captured vessels that were being operated by uploaded human tactical programs. The machines that had seemed invincible were being defeated by their own weapons. "Captain," said Communications Officer Seojin, "I'm receiving surrender signals from the remaining Devourer vessels. They're requesting terms for withdrawal." But Jiho knew that allowing them to escape would only postpone the inevitable. Through the neural link, he could sense the vast network of Devourer ships scattered across the galaxy, all connected by quantum communication systems that operated faster than light itself. If even one ship escaped, it would carry the knowledge of humanity's capabilities back to the others. "Negative," he replied. "We end this here and now." The final phase of the battle was unlike anything the surviving alien fleet had ever witnessed. The Defiant didn't just destroy the remaining Devourer ships, it systematically dismantled them at the quantum level, breaking them down into their component particles and scattering those particles across multiple dimensions so they could never be reassembled. As the last enemy vessel dissolved into nothingness, a profound silence fell over the Altara system. The threat that had terrorized civilizations across the galaxy for millions of years was finally ended, defeated not by superior firepower, but by human adaptability and ancient precursor technology working together. The Defiant settled into orbit around a nearby planet, its weapons powering down, but its true capabilities now unmistakably revealed to every species in the galaxy. The crude-looking human ship that had been exiled to the Outer Rim was actually the most advanced vessel ever constructed. "This is Captain Kim to all surviving vessels," Jiho announced across all communication frequencies. "The immediate threat has been neutralized. Medical assistance will be provided to any ship that requires it." The response from the alien fleet was a mixture of gratitude, amazement, and confusion. Admiral Thane, whose golden flagship had barely survived the initial attack, was the first to ask the question that everyone was thinking. "Captain Kim, what exactly are you people?" Jiho took a deep breath before answering, knowing that his words would change everything. "Admiral, humanity has been serving as the galaxy's guardians for far longer than you realize. We are the inheritors of the precursor civilization, the people who built most of the technology your species use every day. The revelation sent shockwaves through the surviving fleet. The primitive humans who had been treated as junior members of the galactic community were actually the descendants of the most advanced civilization in known history." Communications Officer Sora Park opened channels to broadcast centers across the galaxy as Captain Jiho continued his explanation. The precursors didn't disappear. They evolved and chose to guide younger species from the shadows rather than rule over them directly. When the Devourers first appeared millions of years ago, our ancestors fought them to a standstill and then went into hiding, preparing for the day when the ancient enemy would return. The implications were staggering. Every major technological breakthrough that had advanced galactic civilization, every mysterious discovery that had pushed species toward the stars, every convenient solution that had appeared just when it was needed most. All of it had been quietly guided by humanity. When the Galactic Council reconvened weeks later, the chamber looked very different. The floating seats were arranged in a new configuration, with humanity no longer sitting in the junior member section, but taking their place as the acknowledged protector species. Representatives Wujin Nam and Aryam Sun sat with quiet dignity as the other species tried to process the new reality. The galaxy's true guardians had never left. They had simply been waiting patiently, ensuring that when the darkness returned, civilization would be ready to defend itself. And now that the secret was revealed, humanity could finally step out of the shadows and take their rightful place as the teachers and protectors they had always been. The age of hiding was over. The age of open guardianship had begun.